What if the smartest kid in school was the one everyone thought was a failure? This is the true story of a boy who was punished for asking to stand and ended up rewriting the future of education. Stick around to see how one test exposed the system and changed everything. It was 9:15 a.m. when Eli Parker burst into Ms. Harlan's classroom, his breath coming fast, his backpack clutched tightly to his chest like a life preserver. The door creaked shut behind him, and the room fell silent. Late again, Eli. Miss Deborah Harlan didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone sliced through the air like a scalpel, cold, sharp, final. She motioned to his seat with a clipped nod. Sit down, now. But Eli didn't move. He stood frozen at the front of the class, his gaze flicking between the other students, who were now watching with a mix of curiosity and dread. I'm sorry, Ms. Harlan, he said quietly. Can I stand today? Deborah's eyebrows shot up. A flush crept into her cheeks. Anger, not embarrassment. Excuse me, she said. You most certainly may not. Take your seat like everyone else. But my back, Eli started, barely above a whisper. Your back? She echoed with a scoff. Is that today's excuse? First it was a family emergency. Now it's a sore back? Snickers rippled through the class. Eli's grip on his backpack tightened. The welts from last week's punishment, a ruler across the lower back, still burned every time he sat. But who was going to believe that a teacher did that? I said sit down! Ms. Harlan's hand slammed against her desk, a jarring crack that echoed through the room. Eli flinched. Then finally he said it. I can't. Silence. Thick. Unyielding. Even Noah Jenkins, the class clown, didn't dare laugh now. Ms. Harlan's expression changed. Her mouth curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Calm. Too calm. Well then, she said sweetly, since you're feeling so special today, let's see how special you really are. She turned to the whiteboard, erasing the basic algebra equation she'd prepared for the day's lesson. Then, in broad, confident strokes, she wrote a tangled mess of symbols that none of the 8th graders had ever seen before. This, she announced, is a calculus problem, one I give to my 11th grade AP students. The class erupted in laughter. Ms. Harlan gestured toward the board. Since you've decided you don't need to follow directions like the rest of us, you have 5 minutes to solve it, or it's a week of detention. Eli stared at the board. Fear coiled in his stomach. But under that fear was something else. Familiarity. Those weren't just meaningless symbols. They made sense. Not all of them, but enough. What no one in that classroom knew, what Ms. Harlan had no clue about, was that for the past year, while most kids played Fortnite or scrolled TikTok, Eli had been slipping into the back room of Westside Public Library. Not for comic books, not for teen drama novels, but for math. Back again, Eli? Mrs. Doyle, the gray-haired librarian, would say every Tuesday and Thursday as he beelined to the math section. It started when he was 7, watching his dad, a construction worker, calculate measurements for a small project in their apartment. Math is the language of the universe, kiddo, his dad had said. People lie. Emotions lie. But numbers? They don't. At home, things weren't easy. His mom worked double shifts as a nurse's aide. His dad took whatever gigs he could get. They lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment where Eli shared a room with his little sister. There was no quiet, no space. But in math, he found stillness, clarity, a kind of peace. His bedroom walls weren't decorated with posters of athletes or pop stars. They were lined with scratch paper covered in equations and diagrams he'd printed from the library. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. He found an old calculus textbook left behind on a table. It was filled with words and formulas that looked like a foreign language. At first, he flipped through it out of boredom, then curiosity, then fascination. With help from YouTube tutorials and math forums, Eli taught himself derivatives and integrals by flashlight after his sister fell asleep. His mom would call him for dinner, and he'd slide the notebooks under the bed like they were contraband. Not because he was ashamed, he just didn't want them to worry. His dad caught him once. "What's all this?" he asked, flipping through a page filled with calculations. "Just stuff I'm learning," Eli mumbled. His dad didn't say anything at first. Then he looked up and said, "You keep going, son. Your mind's going to take you places my hands never could." That quiet support made all the difference. His mom started bringing home old math workbooks from donation bins. His dad started asking Eli to double-check measurements on home repairs, but no one at school ever saw that version of Eli, until now. He took a shaky breath and picked up the dry erase marker. Behind him, someone whispered, "He's actually going to try it?" A few students snorted. Noah mimicked a dramatic prayer gesture. Ms. Harlan leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, smug. Clock's ticking. Eli approached the board, heart pounding. His hands trembled. He paused for a beat, then started writing. The first steps came slowly, then faster. Substitute this. Apply that. Simplify. Isolate the variable. Integrate. Confused murmurs replaced laughter. Eyes narrowed, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. "What is he doing?" Noah whispered. Ms. Harlan stood up, eyes narrowing. Eli wrote with purpose now, numbers and symbols dancing across the board. The pain in his back faded. The classroom disappeared. In that moment, he wasn't the poor kid, the troublemaker, the one always late. He was a mathematician. 3 minutes later, he capped the marker and underlined his final answer twice, then turned. Silence. Ms. Harlan stormed to the front, scanning the board. Her smirk faded. "This is," she muttered. "Where did you get this? Did you memorize it?" "No, ma'am," Eli replied. "I solved it." She turned on him, eyes blazing. "You expect me to believe you did this? You've been barely passing my class." "I've been studying on my own," he said. "For a year." Her face turned red. "Enough. This is clearly cheating. Principal's office. Now." Before he left, Lena Morales, a quiet girl in the back, raised her hand. "What if he actually did solve it?" "Not another word," Ms. Harlan snapped. As Eli walked out, the torn remains of his solution floated to the floor. But the truth was already out. Eli Parker sat stiffly on the wooden bench outside Principal Brooks' office, his backpack still hugged tightly against his chest. He stared at the closed door in front of him, its frosted glass etched with the words, "Principal, Mr. A. Brooks." Inside, voices rose and fell, muffled but intense. He didn't need to hear the words to know what Ms. Harlan was saying. He could picture it, her clipped tone, her stiff posture, the way her finger probably jabbed the air as she accused him of cheating. Complete insubordination, her voice carried through the door. He defied direct instructions, disrupted the lesson, and fabricated a solution to a problem far beyond his capability. Eli clenched his jaw, staring at the floor. His palms were damp, his back still sore, but worse than the pain was the weight in his chest, the familiar sense of helplessness. He hadn't done anything wrong. He'd solved the problem, fair and square, but here he was, once again, waiting to be punished. The door opened suddenly. "Come in, Eli," Principal Brooks said, holding the door with one hand. Eli rose slowly, wincing as he stood. He entered the office and instinctively stayed close to the wall, as far from Ms. Harlan as possible. She was already seated in one of the visitor chairs, her arms crossed, expression severe. Principal Brooks, a tall man with thinning gray hair and a perpetual look of exhaustion, gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Have a seat." Eli hesitated. Sitting made the pain worse, but standing might seem defiant. He chose to perch carefully on the edge of the chair, his back straight despite the discomfort. "Ms. Harlan has told me her version of events," Principal Brooks began, folding his hands in front of him. "Now I'd like to hear yours." Eli looked down, then back up. "I didn't cheat," he said. "I solved the problem." "Impossible," Ms. Harlan said flatly. "He's never shown any advanced ability. He's barely grasped 8th grade math. That was an AP-level calculus problem." "I've been learning on my own," Eli said, "at the library, online, for almost a year." Ms. Harlan let out a sharp laugh. And next you'll say you're working for NASA. Principal Brooks silenced her with a raised hand. Eli, why did you refuse to sit down in the first place? There it was, the question he didn't want to answer. My back hurts, he said quietly. From last week. From what? The principal asked. I fell, Eli finished lamely. Ms. Harlan leaned forward. He's lying. It's a story he's made up to justify his behavior. He was disrespectful and disruptive. Principal Brooks studied Eli carefully. Ms. Harlan has been with us a long time. If she says the problem was far beyond your capabilities, I have to consider that seriously. But I did solve it, Eli insisted. I can do it again. Give me any problem, anything, I'll solve it, right here. Ms. Harlan scoffed. This is absurd. He's performing, seeking attention. Enough, the principal said, his voice firm. Eli, I'm suspending the detention for now, but we're going to get to the bottom of this. At that moment, a knock on the office door interrupted them. It opened, and a younger woman with shoulder-length curls and kind eyes stepped in. Sorry to interrupt. I heard Eli was here. Ms. Carter, Principal Brooks said. What brings you down here? I'm Eli's science teacher, she replied. I wanted to check on him. I saw him earlier and something felt off. She noticed the detention slip in Eli's hand. What happened? Just a disciplinary matter, Ms. Harlan said quickly. Nothing that concerns the science department. It concerns me if it involves one of my best students, Ms. Carter replied, stepping closer. Best student? She repeated, glancing at Eli. Yes. Ms. Harlan raised an eyebrow. In science? In everything. He did an independent project on mathematical modeling for the science fair last spring. Used differential equations. Won third place overall. Principal Brooks turned back to Eli. Is that true? Eli nodded. I've seen his work, Ms. Carter added. He uses calculus-level thinking in his reports. He's been teaching himself for months. Ms. Harlan's mouth opened, then closed. So, you believe he really solved that problem? The principal asked. I don't just believe it. I'd bet on it. Principal Brooks sat back in his chair, processing the information. Ms. Harlan, any reason this wasn't mentioned before? Because he asked me not to tell anyone, Ms. Carter said gently. He didn't want to draw attention to himself. There was a pause. And the issue with his back? She asked. Eli, may I? No, Ms. Harlan said firmly. This is getting out of hand. Let's see, Principal Brooks said quietly. Reluctantly, Eli lifted the back of his shirt just enough to reveal several red, raised welts. The room went completely still. Ms. Carter gasped. Who did this to you? Principal Brooks asked, though his eyes were already on Ms. Harlan. I fell, Eli repeated mechanically. No one gets welts like that from falling, Ms. Carter said softly. This is outrageous, Ms. Harlan snapped. We don't know where those marks came from. Enough, Principal Brooks said sharply. Eli, did this happen at school? Eli hesitated. Last week, I didn't finish a problem fast enough. The silence was thunderous. I'm ending this meeting here, Ms. Harlan said, standing abruptly. These accusations are baseless. Sit down, Ms. Harlan, the principal commanded. We're not finished. He turned to Eli. Do you believe you can solve AP-level calculus problems? Yes, sir. Then we'll find out. Tomorrow morning, you'll take a supervised test. Ms. Harlan will prepare the problems. I'll review them for fairness. Fine, Ms. Harlan muttered. Ms. Carter, you'll be present as well. We're going to do this the right way. If Eli passes, we'll be having a much different conversation. Eli nodded, heart pounding. As he left the office with Ms. Carter, he heard Ms. Harlan's voice rising behind him. This is outrageous. You're siding with a child over an experienced teacher. Whatever tomorrow held, Eli knew one thing. This time, he wasn't walking into that room alone. Put yourself in his shoes for a second. You're 13. You just solved a problem no one thought you could. But instead of praise, you're being accused, judged, punished. Tell me honestly, what would you do if the truth hurt more than the lie? Would you speak up or stay quiet just to survive? Drop a comment below. Have you ever been punished for being right? Eli Parker didn't sleep much that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running equations through his mind like lullabies. The The thought of facing Ms. Harlan again made his stomach churn, but the promise of finally being heard, finally being seen, kept him from falling into despair. Sometime around midnight, his phone buzzed. "Dr. Lang, you still up?" Eli stared at the screen. He hadn't told his mentor about the test yet. He typed back, "Eli, yeah, got something big tomorrow. A test." "Dr. Lang, need help? Librarian 30? Without hesitation, Eli got up, quietly dressed, and slipped out into the cool night. The library lights glowed like a beacon in the dark. Dr. Marcus Lang was already there waiting at their usual corner table. Mid-50s, graying hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a calm presence that always seemed to quiet Eli's anxiety. "You look like you've been doing derivatives in your sleep," Dr. Lang said as Eli sat down. "I might have," Eli replied, half smiling. "I've got to take a test tomorrow, a big one. They think I cheated." Dr. Lang's expression darkened. "That calculus problem you solved, someone's accusing you of copying it?" Eli nodded. Dr. Lang shook his head, his voice low and steady. "You know the difference between someone who memorizes a formula and someone who understands it? One can recite, the other can create." "I'm scared," Eli admitted. "What if I blank out tomorrow? What if I can't do it under pressure?" Dr. Lang leaned forward. "Math doesn't come from pressure. It comes from patterns, from logic. You're not solving these problems because someone made you. You're solving them because your mind sees what most others miss. That's not going to disappear overnight." For the next 2 hours, they didn't drill problems. They explored ideas. Why certain functions behave the way they do. How change is measured. Why infinite sums converge. As they wrapped up, Dr. Lang asked, "Do you want me to come tomorrow? Not for the test itself, but afterwards to speak on your behalf." "You'd do that?" "Eli," Dr. Lang said, his tone warm, "I believe in your talent. But more than that, I believe in you. I've seen who you are. It's time others see it too." The next morning, Eli arrived at school early. The hallways were mostly empty, and for once, that was a comfort. He wore his backpack like armor, walked with purpose even though every step was tinged with nerves. Outside the conference room, Ms. Carter waited for him. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Nervous," he admitted. She offered a reassuring smile. "Good, means you care. Just remember, this isn't a trap. It's a chance." Inside, the room had been transformed into a neutral testing space. A plain table, several sharpened pencils, scratch paper, and a calculator. No distractions. No students. No Ms. Harlan looming at the front of a classroom. Principal Brooks was already seated. "Morning, Eli," he said formally. "Here's how this will work." He held up a sealed envelope. "These are problems prepared by Ms. Harlan. I've reviewed them for fairness and range. They span material from 8th grade through advanced calculus. You have 2 hours to complete as many as you can. No phone, no notes, just you." Ms. Harlan sat in the corner, arms folded, lips pursed into a tight line. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her body language screamed doubt. "You'll be supervised," the principal continued. "No interruptions. Are you ready?" Eli nodded. "Yes, sir." Principal Brooks unsealed the envelope and slid the test across the table. "You may begin." Eli flipped the first page. The first few problems were almost laughably easy basic algebra and equations he could solve in his head. He worked quickly but carefully, checking each answer before moving on. Page 2 ramped up to geometry and trigonometry. He moved through them at a steady pace. By page 3, the problems shifted to pre-calculus, function transformations, composite equations, limits. Then, page 4, calculus, derivatives, chain rule applications, integration by substitution. Eli took a deep breath and kept going. One question after another, his pencil flying across the page. Outside the room, Ms. Carter and Ms. Harlan waited in the hallway. Ms. Carter sat calmly reading a science journal, while Ms. Harlan paced back and forth like a caged animal. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "He's probably in there staring at the paper, completely lost." "Why does this bother you so much?" Ms. Carter asked without looking up. You've been a teacher for over 20 years. You're not going to lose your job over a student doing well. He's not just doing well, he's trying to undermine my authority. No, Ms. Carter replied gently. He's just finally being given a fair chance to show what he's capable of. Just then, the door opened. Principal Brooks stepped out, holding a piece of paper. He's asking for more scratch paper, he said, almost expressionless. Ms. Harlan blinked. More paper? He's finished the entire test, the principal said. He's now writing alternate solutions. Ms. Carter's eyes sparkled. That sounds like Eli. That's impossible, Ms. Harlan snapped. It's been barely 40 minutes. The principal didn't answer. He walked calmly to the supply cabinet, pulled out more paper, and returned to the conference room. Ms. Harlan stood frozen in the hallway, her confidence unraveling. Inside, Eli was in his zone. The numbers danced, the logic flowed. He didn't just answer questions, he restructured them, showing multiple methods and thought processes. He left notes on his reasoning. He cited mathematical principles by name. He didn't notice time passing. Only the rhythm of pencil on paper, the comforting certainty that, for once, he was allowed to be who he truly was. When he finished, nearly an hour ahead of schedule, he leaned back and let out a long breath. He had nothing to hide, no shame, no fear. His work was there on paper, permanent, clear, true. Imagine this. You're just a kid. Everyone doubts you. But now, every answer you write is a piece of who you are, a quiet rebellion written in pencil. Have you ever had to prove your worth, not with words, but with results? If you've ever felt underestimated, tell us below. What did you do to finally be seen? By the time Eli Parker stepped out of the conference room, word had already started to spread. A few students lingered in the hall pretending to go to their lockers, sneaking glances his way. He kept his eyes down, trying to block out the whispers, but this time they weren't whispers of ridicule. They were whispers of curiosity. Did he really finish the whole thing? I heard he's smarter than the seniors. Noah said he saw him do calculus, like real calculus. Eli didn't say a word. He just walked to class, clutching his backpack, his steps a little lighter than usual. Meanwhile, back in Principal Brooks' office, a different kind of tension filled the air. Eli's test lay spread out on the conference table. Principal Brooks sat at the head, reviewing notes, while Ms. Harlan stared straight ahead, stiff as a board. Ms. Carter, seated opposite her, gently turned pages, nodding as she skimmed Eli's solutions. He didn't just solve the problems, Ms. Carter said finally. He offered alternative solutions for at least 4 of the calculus questions. One of them uses an approach I haven't even taught in my AP class. Principal Brooks looked up. And you're confident he worked independently? Absolutely, Ms. Carter replied. There's consistency in his thought process. His work is clean, logical, and intuitive. This isn't rote memorization. This is understanding. Ms. Harlan didn't speak. Ms. Harlan, Principal Brooks said, I'd like your professional evaluation. She hesitated, then reluctantly reached for the papers. For several long minutes, she silently reviewed Eli's test. Her eyes moved faster as she flipped through the final pages. Then slower. Then stopped. Finally, she looked up. The answers are correct, she admitted, each word landing like a stone. Even the advanced problems. But what? Ms. Carter pressed. Ms. Harlan looked cornered, like someone trying to climb a wall with no ledge. He had help. He must have. A student doesn't just go from struggling with algebra to solving integrals overnight. He didn't go overnight, Ms. Carter said calmly. You just weren't looking. Before the conversation could continue, a knock sounded on the office door. Principal Brooks called, "Come in." The door opened, and in stepped a man with a worn leather satchel and silver-rimmed glasses, Dr. Lang. "Apologies for the interruption," he said, offering a polite nod. "I'm Dr. Marcus Lang, professor of mathematics at State University. I believe you're discussing a student named Eli Parker?" Principal Brooks stood. "Yes, sir. Please, have a seat." Dr. Lang sat beside Ms. Carter and offered a warm glance toward her before turning back to the principal. I've been mentoring Eli privately for the past 6 months, twice a week, at the Westside Community Center Library. That's a serious claim, Ms. Harlan said sharply. We have no documentation of this. You wouldn't, Dr. Lang replied mildly, because Eli didn't want attention, he just wanted to learn. Principal Brooks slid a copy of the test across the table. We'd appreciate your professional opinion. Dr. Lang pulled out a pen, quietly examining each page. As he read, the corners of his mouth twitched upward. This substitution in problem 7 clever. And here he bypassed a U sub by completing the square. Very few students think to do that. He looked up. Yes, this is Eli's work. I recognize the style and reasoning. Are you saying a 13-year-old boy is operating at a college level? Ms. Harlan asked, incredulous. Dr. Lang nodded. Not just operating thriving. I'd place his current understanding around that of a second-year math undergrad. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Transformative. Principal Brooks leaned forward. So you're saying he didn't cheat? This was real? Dr. Lang gave a small, proud smile. Oh, it's very real. Ms. Harlan's lips tightened. I don't understand. I've been teaching for 27 years. If a student had that kind of mind, I'd have seen it. Ms. Carter responded gently. Only if you were looking. Principal Brooks folded his hands. Then let me say this clearly. Eli's test results are valid. His abilities are authentic. And what happened in your classroom yesterday was a mistake, Dr. Lang finished softly. The principal turned to Ms. Harlan. This raises serious concerns, not only about your judgment in assessing talent, but also about your conduct with the student. I've never laid a hand on him, Ms. Harlan said quickly. His back tells a different story, Ms. Carter said, her voice hardening. We'll investigate that separately, the principal said. For now, the detention is void, and Eli will no longer be in your class. Dr. Lang cleared his throat. With your permission, I'd like to continue mentoring him and help design a curriculum that matches his potential. Make it official, Principal Brooks agreed. We'll move fast. And just like that, the tide turned. For the first time in his life, Eli wasn't in trouble for being different. He was being celebrated for it. Imagine being called a liar for months, then watching your truth unfold line by line until even your harshest critic has to admit they were wrong. Have you ever had to wait that long for someone to finally say, I see you now? Drop A in the comments if you've ever turned doubt into proof. The lunchroom was buzzing. Whispers darted between tables faster than the cafeteria workers could serve up chicken nuggets. Students craned their necks to get a glimpse of Eli Parker as he slid into his usual corner seat with a tray he barely touched. Is it true? He solved all of it? Even the calculus part? Across the room, Noah Jenkins, the class clown and one of Eli's former tormentors, leaned toward his friends. I mean, I always thought he was weird, but genius weird? That's different. Nobody laughed. Not this time. A few minutes later, Noah stood and, to everyone's surprise, including his own, crossed the room to Eli's table. He plopped his tray down across from him, awkward and unsure. Hey. Eli blinked. Hey. So, Noah scratched the back of his neck. You really did all those problems? Eli nodded. Noah let out a low whistle. Dang. My brother's in AP Calc at the high school, and he said one of those questions was like, college hard. Before Eli could answer, another student approached. Then another. Soon, 4 kids were huddled around his lunch table. My cousin's in 11th grade, a girl said. He didn't believe me when I told him about you, so he sent me this problem. She slid her phone toward Eli. On the screen was a photo of a handwritten equation, dense with symbols. Want to try it? She asked. Eli hesitated. He didn't want to be anyone's show, but then he saw the genuine curiosity in her eyes and nodded. He pulled out a pencil and a napkin. Within moments, he began to write. As he talked through the steps, heads leaned in. Phones came out. Someone whispered, he's teaching it like a professor. For the first time, Eli wasn't the kid people ignored or whispered about. He was the one they listened to. Meanwhile, in a very different room of the school, Principal Brooks sat across from Eli's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Parker looked tired, more tired than usual. Mr. Parker still had drywall dust on his sleeves from a morning shift. Mrs. Parker's scrubs were creased from her overnight work at the hospital. In front of them, on the desk, were photographs, printed stills taken by the school nurse. They showed what Eli hadn't dared speak aloud. Red marks, thin and angry, cutting across his lower back. "My son never told us," Mrs. Parker said quietly, her hands trembling. "He didn't think we'd believe him," Principal Brooks replied, his voice heavy with regret. "And that's on us, on the system, on me." Mr. Parker's jaw tightened. "We moved here because we thought this district was better, safer. And now I'm looking at photos of my boy with welts on his back." "There will be an investigation," the principal said. "Ms. Harlan has been placed on leave while we move forward. In the meantime, I want to show you something else." He slid a manila folder across the desk. Mrs. Parker opened it cautiously. Inside were printed pages, a proposal. "This is Eli's new academic plan," Principal Brooks explained. "It includes advanced mathematics instruction at the high school, continued mentorship with Dr. Lang, and modified coursework in his other classes so he's not bored or held back." Mrs. Parker's eyes widened. This is real?" "Your son is exceptional," the principal said, "and we're going to give him what he needs." Mr. Parker nodded slowly, emotion swelling behind his usual stoic demeanor. About time somebody noticed. Across town, in a modest apartment, Veronica Harlan sat alone. Her living room was quiet. No TV, no music. Just the low hum of the fridge and the sound of her own heartbeat. On the table in front of her sat a single sheet of paper, a formal notice of investigation. Her name, her title, her suspension. After 27 years of teaching. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just stared. Her phone buzzed again, another missed call from a colleague, probably wanting to offer quiet support or half-hearted sympathy. She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes wandered to the bookshelf beside her armchair. It was filled with math textbooks, old ones, new ones, some worn with notes in the margins, others pristine, never opened. For years, she had believed she was the standard, the bar. And then came a boy with messy hair and a quiet voice who cracked the walls she'd spent a career building. That evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, a knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Dr. Marcus Lang standing in the hallway. "Dr. Lang," she said, startled. "If you came to gloat—" "I didn't," he said gently. "I came to understand." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "You want coffee?" "No, thank you." He sat in her worn armchair. She remained standing, arms crossed. "I've seen thousands of students," he said. "Some bright, some brilliant. A handful like Eli beyond either." She didn't speak. "But the real question," he continued, "is why that threatened you." Veronica's mask cracked, just a little, because it made everything I believed feel like a lie. Dr. Lang leaned forward slightly. "How so?" "I worked for years to understand math," she said, voice taut. "Sacrificed, studied, earned every bit of my knowledge. And then this kid just knows it, like breathing?" "That doesn't undo your work," he said. "It doesn't make your knowledge less valuable. But yes, some minds are different. Some see the world in numbers. It's not a flaw. It's a gift." Veronica looked away, jaw clenched. "The real tragedy," Dr. Lang said softly, "isn't that Eli was exceptional. It's that you made him feel like he had to hide it." By the time the school board meeting was called to order at 7:00 p.m., the district conference room was standing room only. Parents filled every seat. Students stood against the walls. Reporters lined the back, their cameras and microphones aimed toward the long table at the front of the room where 5 board members sat beneath the district seal. What was originally scheduled to be a routine meeting had become the most anticipated event in West Side's recent history. Eli. Parker sat near the front between his parents. His dad had taken off work early. His mom was still in her nursing scrubs. Dr. Marcus Lang sat beside them, his usual calm presence a quiet anchor in the chaos. A few rows back, Ms. Carter gave Eli a reassuring smile and thumbs up. Board President Eleanor Washington, a stern-looking woman in a navy blazer, tapped her gavel. The room quieted instantly. "We've amended tonight's agenda," she announced. "We will be addressing the allegations brought forth concerning conduct at Westside Middle School." Principal Brooks stood and stepped forward to the podium. His voice was steady, but carried the weight of what he was about to say. "Madam President, members of the board, community members, what I'm about to share is difficult, but necessary." He then laid it all out. The classroom incident, the advanced calculus problem, the accusation of cheating, the discovery of the physical marks, and the eventual confirmation of Eli's extraordinary abilities. "This wasn't just a disciplinary failure," Principal Brooks said. "It was a failure of trust, of recognition, of responsibility. We allowed a child's light to be dimmed under the weight of outdated authority and unchecked assumptions." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Parents exchanged glances. Some shook their heads. Then came public comments. Mr. Parker was the first to take the mic. "My wife and I trusted this school. We worked double shifts so we could afford to live in this district," he said. "And our son came home in pain, not just physically, but emotionally. He hid his brilliance because he believed it wouldn't be safe to show it." Mrs. Parker followed. Her voice trembled, but she stood tall. "Eli never told us what he was going through," she said. "He didn't want to add to our stress. That's the kind of kid he is. Quiet, thoughtful. He didn't ask for special treatment, just fairness." Ms. Carter took the mic next. "Our system has to change," she said firmly. "We can't afford to overlook gifted students simply because they don't fit into neat boxes. And we cannot allow any child to be hurt under the guise of discipline." The final speaker caught everyone by surprise. Noah Jenkins. He stepped nervously to the mic, his voice shaky at first. "I used to think it was funny when Ms. Harlan picked on Eli," he admitted. "We all did. We thought it was just her way of being tough." He glanced toward Eli. "But now I get it. She wasn't being tough. She was being cruel. And we just went along with it. That's on us, too." A silence fell over the room after he finished. Not just quiet, but reflection. President Washington nodded solemnly. "The board has reviewed the evidence and completed its investigation. The following decisions have been made." You could hear a pin drop. Effective immediately, Ms. Veronica Harlan's employment with the district is terminated. A formal report has been submitted to the state board recommending revocation of her teaching license. There was a beat of stunned silence, then applause. Not loud, not raucous, just sincere. The board president raised a hand. "There's more." She listed new district-wide changes. Mandatory abuse recognition and prevention training for all staff. Zero tolerance for physical punishment. A new program for identifying and supporting gifted students. And the creation of an anonymous reporting system for students. Then she turned directly to Eli. "On behalf of the board and this district, I apologize for the harm done to you. We failed to see you. We will not make that mistake again." Outside the building, a small crowd had formed. Reporters asked questions. Parents talked in small groups. The atmosphere was charged, but not with anger this time, with momentum. As Eli and his family exited, people clapped. Some students from school approached awkwardly. A few just said, "Hey." Others offered high fives. One kid gave him a sticker that said, "Math equals power." Noah caught up with him near the parking lot. "I meant what I said in there," he told Eli. "You didn't deserve any of what happened." Eli didn't respond right away. Then quietly, he said, "Thanks." A pause. "You ever think about joining math club?" Noah asked, rubbing the back of his neck. "I mean, it might be kind of cool to learn some of that stuff." Eli raised an eyebrow. "You in math club?" "I am now." They both laughed awkwardly, but it was a start. That night, back at home, Eli sat at the kitchen table with a warm plate of food in front of him and his parents nearby. The news was on in the background. His name flashed across the screen. A still photo of the whiteboard where he'd written the original calculus solution lingered for a moment. He watched in silence. "I always knew you had something special," his dad said quietly. "Yeah?" Eli asked. His father nodded. But seeing the whole town realize it, that's something else. His mother leaned over and kissed the top of his head. "You were brave," she said. "Not just for solving that problem, but for standing up." Eli poked at his food, his thoughts elsewhere. Tomorrow would bring new classes, new expectations, a new identity to navigate. But tonight he wasn't hiding. He was seen. 3 days after the board meeting, Westside Middle School didn't look much different from the outside. Same brick walls, same morning bell, same low hum of fluorescent lights flickering to life at 8 o'clock a.m. But inside, something had changed. Teachers made eye contact with students more. Hall monitors stopped giving side glances and started giving nods. Kids whispered less behind backs and spoke more to faces. It was as if the air itself had shifted, like someone had cracked open a window in a room that had been shut too long. And Eli Parker? He felt it too. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't just the quiet kid in the back who sometimes forgot homework and barely raised his hand. Now, he was the kid who solved the impossible problem. And that came with weight. At first, Eli tried to ignore it. He kept his head down, focused on his classes. But attention finds its way in strange forms. "Hey, Eli," someone called in the hallway, holding up a tablet. "Can you check if this equation's right?" "Eli, you coming to the gifted seminar after school?" "Yo, teach, can Eli explain this one? He probably gets it better than you." That last one earned a sharp look from the teacher and a low, amused grin from Eli. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. He still didn't quite trust it. But he was adjusting. At 10 a.m., he left his regular class and walked across the street to Westside High for his new advanced math sessions. The high school building was bigger, busier, louder. But in room 314, a quiet sanctuary had been carved out just for him. "Welcome back," said Mr. Eaton, a high school math teacher with a laid-back demeanor and a love for whiteboard markers. "We're starting derivatives today, but I've got a feeling you'll want to skip ahead." Eli gave a shy smile. "Maybe just a bit." They worked through a college-level problem set together. It was the kind of challenge that made Eli feel alive, like solving each equation was peeling back the secrets of the universe. Midway through the session, a senior named Maya leaned over from the next table. "Hey, you're that 8th grader, right? The one with the AP test?" "Yeah," Eli said, unsure if it was admiration or skepticism in her voice. She passed him a notebook. "Want to check my work? I think I messed up the chain rule." He glanced at it, nodded, and gently pointed out a step she'd skipped. Her eyebrows rose. "Nice catch. You're good." That felt new. Back at the middle school, Ms. Carter watched Eli through the window as he returned from the high school building later that day. There was something in his stride now, not arrogance, but awareness, the weight of being seen. She met him at the classroom door. "How was the lesson?" "Fun," Eli replied. "We did optimization problems." "I'll take your word for it," she smiled. "You'll be running the department soon." He chuckled, but then hesitated. "Ms. Carter? Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why didn't you ever say anything before about what I was doing, about what you saw?" She took a breath. "Because you asked me not to." "I know. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd said something sooner." Ms. Carter looked at him, her expression soft. "You didn't need to. Because you kept going. You kept showing up. You kept learning. That was you speaking for yourself. Loud and clear." Eli nodded slowly. She added, "But if you're asking whether I should have pushed harder, maybe. But I also knew you were building something in secret. And sometimes, the best things grow quietly." That afternoon, Eli found himself back in the library, his old sanctuary. He took his usual corner seat, now a bit more crowded than before. A 6th grader plopped into the chair across from him. "Hey, Eli, I was told you're good at math. I'm like really bad at fractions. Can you help?" Eli smiled. "Sure." A 7th grader pulled up a chair too. "Wait, are we doing math club now? Because I'm totally failing decimals." Within minutes, he was surrounded by a mini tutoring session. No one had planned it, but that was the thing about change. It didn't always ask for permission. Ms. Carter passed by on her way out, caught sight of the impromptu session, and smiled. "He's not just solving problems anymore," she murmured. "He's becoming the solution." Across the city, Veronica Harlan sat across from an educational review panel. The hearing was procedural, but every word felt like judgment. A typed document in front of her listed formal accusations: inappropriate discipline, abuse of authority, professional misconduct, failure to report injury. She sat stiffly, hands folded. The chairwoman looked at her over the top of her glasses. "Do you have anything to say regarding the events leading to your termination?" Veronica cleared her throat. "I believed I was maintaining order in my classroom." "And the physical marks on the student's back?" A pause. "They were never meant to harm," she said quietly. "But I realize now, harm doesn't always come from intention. Sometimes it comes from blindness." There was a silence, heavy, loaded. "Do you believe the student was as gifted as has been stated?" Another pause, longer. "Yes," she said at last. "And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." Back at home, Eli sat at the dinner table, notebook open, his younger sister coloring beside him. His parents were finishing dinner, the radio low in the background. "You doing schoolwork?" his dad asked. Eli shook his head. "Nah, just something I'm working on." His dad nodded, then smiled. "It's still wild, you know, all this. The school, the news, the meetings." Eli looked up. "It feels weird, but good weird." His mom added, "We're proud of you, not just for being smart, for being kind. Quiet strength, that's harder than any math problem." Eli blushed and lowered his head back to his notebook. But inside, something warm stirred. A new chapter was beginning. One where he wasn't hiding. One where his voice mattered. And as he sketched the start of a new formula in the corner of the page, he realized this wasn't the end of a story. It was just the beginning. By the time the next week rolled around, the whispers had died down. The stares lessened. And Eli? He started blending back into the hallways again, only this time by choice, not by force. His name was no longer the subject of scandal. Now, it floated through conversation like a low hum of curiosity, admiration, and maybe even inspiration. "Hey Eli, that trick you showed me on the worksheet worked like magic. Got a quiz Friday. You gonna drop in on our study group? My mom said she saw you on the news. She thinks you should run for president." He laughed at that one. No longer a cautionary tale or a controversy, Eli had become something else entirely, a presence. At the end of a Tuesday class, Ms. Carter called out as students packed their bags. "Eli, can you hang back for a sec?" He lingered as the others filed out, the sound of footsteps and chatter fading down the hallway. "I got an email from State University this morning," she said, walking over to her desk and pulling up a printed letter. "There's a summer math program, advanced, highly competitive. They're offering you a spot-full scholarship." Eli's eyes widened. "Me?" She smiled. "Yes, you." He took the paper with trembling hands. The university's logo, his name, an invitation to study with college students and top high schoolers from across the state. "They've seen your work," Ms. Carter added. "Dr. Lang sent over a few of your problem sets. Apparently, they're still trying to figure out how you solved one of the integral proofs with a non-standard method." Eli swallowed hard. "Do I have to go?" "No," she said gently. "But you can. It's your choice." He stared at the page for a long time. For a moment, doubt crept in like an old ghost. What if I don't belong there? What if I'm just the kid who got lucky that one time? But then another voice familiar now spoke up in his mind. What if you do belong? That evening at home, Eli sat with his parents on the living room couch, the invitation letter spread across the coffee table. "Out of state?" his mother Carla asked, trying to hide the concern in her voice. 3 weeks, he replied. "It's on campus, supervised, meals, housing, everything covered." His dad, Daniel, looked at the letter again. This is the real deal, huh? Eli nodded. His mom shifted forward. If you're going, we need to plan. I'll talk to the hospital about switching my schedule that week. Make sure we can... Mom, he interrupted softly. They're covering everything. You don't have to do anything. I just need to decide if I'm ready. She paused, then smiled, eyes watery. Baby, you've been ready for a long time. The rest of the world's just catching up. His dad leaned back, arms crossed in thought. You know, I built a shed once without instructions. Just sketched it out in my head and made it real. Took me a week longer than it should have, but I did it. Eli smiled faintly, confused but curious. His dad continued. That's what you're doing. You're building something, your life, your path. And now you've got blueprints, people willing to help. Doesn't mean it won't still be hard, but you won't be doing it blind. Eli let those words settle. He glanced at the letter again, and for the first time since receiving it, allowed himself to feel excitement. The next day, Dr. Lang waited for Eli in the high school math lab. Their weekly sessions had taken on a new rhythmless tutoring, more mentoring. They talked ideas now, not just steps, concepts, not just results. I hear you're considering the summer program, Dr. Lang said, setting down his coffee mug. Eli nodded. I think I want to go. Dr. Lang smiled. Good. Scared though, Eli added. Good, Dr. Lang said again. That means it's big enough to matter. They worked through a few advanced modeling problems together. Then, after a thoughtful pause, Eli asked, Why do you help me, really? Dr. Lang took a moment before answering. When I was your age, he began, I had a teacher who told me I was too fast and too scattered. Said I'd never make it in math unless I slowed down and followed the rules. Eli tilted his head. Were you scattered? Oh, absolutely, Dr. Lang laughed. But I wasn't wrong, just wired differently. It took me years to unlearn the idea that math had to look a certain way. When I saw you working through those integrals in your own way, fluid, visual, instinctual, I saw myself, but sharper. Eli looked down, his voice quiet. Ms. Harlan said I was disruptive. She was afraid, Dr. Lang replied. Fearful people call the unfamiliar dangerous, but your mind is a gift, one we need to protect, nurture, and yes, challenge. Eli blinked. Challenge? Always. Later that afternoon, in the newly formed Exceptional Talent Seminar, Eli sat with a small group of students from various grades. Some he knew, most he didn't. There was Emily, a 7th grader who spoke 3 languages fluently, Deshaun, who built working circuits from scratch in his garage, Amara, who composed music that sounded like it came from a film score. This wasn't a class. It was a lab. One where curiosity led the way, and everyone was different, but no one was wrong. Ms. Carter facilitated. Dr. Lang visited weekly. The motto on the whiteboard read, Different isn't a flaw, it's a force. That afternoon, they brainstormed a project together modeling rainfall across the city and comparing it to storm drain capacity. Could help the city plan for flooding, Amara suggested. We could code a simulation, Deshaun added. Eli's eyes lit up. And we can use integrals to measure cumulative volume in specific regions. They looked at him. He corrected with a sheepish grin. We could calculate how much rain a neighborhood can handle before flooding. They laughed, and not in a mocking way, in a with you way. He belonged. That night, as Eli lay in bed, the house quiet, the light from the hallway dimly seeping under his door, he pulled the summer program letter from his backpack. He'd read it a dozen times, but this time, he flipped it over and started writing on the back. Equations, ideas, a plan. He wasn't just thinking about attending. He was thinking about what he'd contribute, about how he'd show up, not as the boy who shocked a classroom, but as the young mathematician who kept going long after the shock wore off, about how he'd earn his space at that table and build a bigger one for others to join. Said he wanted to sit in on your session. Before Eli could ask, the door opened and in walked Dr. Curtis Monroe, the district's head of curriculum. Tall, silver-haired, clipboard in hand. Ah, the young man I've been reading about, Monroe said, offering a handshake. Eli Parker, your work is impressive. Eli shook his hand, feeling a little off balance. I'm here to observe, Monroe continued, trying to understand how we can better support students like you district-wide. Eli looked at Mr. Eaton, who gave him a small nod. You've got this. It was strange, but in a good way. Sitting at a table with adults, not as a case study, but as a collaborator. Ms. Carter slid a paper toward him. You're invited to present next week. Topic's yours. Eli folded the schedule carefully and nodded. I think I've got a few ideas. The next day at lunch, he found a note tucked inside his locker. No name, no signature. Just one line. Thank you for being brave. I'm not good at math, but I know what it feels like to be invisible. You made me feel like maybe I don't have to stay that way forever. He read it twice, then tucked it inside the front flap of his notebook like it was glass. Meanwhile, Ms. Veronica Harlan remained under investigation by the state board. She hadn't left her house much. No interviews, no statements. But something had shifted. She started rereading old student evaluations, the ones she used to brush off. She skimmed articles about twice exceptional students. She even watched a few online panels teachers discussing how brilliance often shows up masked by defiance or anxiety. One night, she flipped through her gradebook from earlier that year and landed on a familiar name. Parker. Eli. Next to it, in her own handwriting, one word. Inconsistent. She stared at it for a long time, then slowly, quietly, put the book down. Back at school, the final bell rang on a Friday afternoon. Eli lingered in the seminar room, packing up his things. Big weekend plans? Amara asked, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Studying, Eli replied, trying to stay sharp for the summer program. She smirked. You're already sharp, maybe too sharp. He laughed, and in that moment he looked nothing like the quiet kid who used to try and disappear. He looked like someone who finally belonged in the world he used to hide from. As he walked through the halls, he passed new banners strung along the walls. One caught his eye. Every mind matters. Beneath it, student artwork. Spirals of sheet music. Layers of equations etched into watercolor. Brushstrokes and geometry colliding like they belonged together. In the corner, a quote. Genius doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits for someone to make space for it. Eli ran his fingers lightly along the edge of the poster. Not long ago, all he wanted was to make it through a day unnoticed. Now, he was helping shape how the next generation would be seen. That night, under a sky speckled with spring stars, Eli sat at his desk by the window, his notebook open. But he wasn't doing homework. He was drafting something new. A mentorship model. A way to pair older students with younger ones, not for grades, not for performance, but for listening, for guidance, for the stuff that never makes it onto a syllabus. He wrote a title at the top of the page, The Equation Project. Then underneath, because every kid is a variable and someone needs to care enough to solve, he smiled, not bad. By early May, the Equation Project had gone from scribbles in Eli Parker's notebook to a quietly growing movement. It started with 5 volunteers, students from the Exceptional Talent Seminar, and a few trusted friends. They weren't perfect. Some were still figuring things out themselves. But that was kind of the point. This wasn't a tutoring group or a study hall. This was something else. A space. A mirror. A way to say, I see you. I've been there. Let's figure this out together. Each week, pairs of students met in the library after school, just for 30 minutes. They talked about everything. Homework struggles. Weird teacher dynamics. What it's like when your brain won't sit still even though your body has to. Sometimes they talked about nothing. And somehow, that meant everything. By week 3, there were 12 participants, then 21. At the same time, prep for Eli's summer math program was heating up. Every few days, a new email from the university popped into his inbox: class schedules, housing instructions, even an invite to present a personal project at the final showcase. "Think you'll present?" Ms. Carter asked during one of their check-ins. "Maybe," Eli replied, hesitating. "What's holding you back?" "I'm just not used to talking about math out loud, like, to people who already get it." She tilted her head. "You talk about it all the time now." "That's different," he said. "Here, I'm the only one who thinks this way. There, I'll just be another one." "And maybe," she said, smiling softly, "that's the best part. You won't be the miracle. You'll be a peer, a collaborator." He nodded, slowly taking that in. He wasn't scared of failing anymore. He was scared of not knowing who he'd be when he didn't have to constantly prove himself. The following Monday, something unexpected happened. Principal Brooks called Eli into his office, but this time it wasn't for a meeting. It was for an introduction. "Eli, meet Dr. Anika Patel," he said. "She's with the State Department of Education. She's doing research on how schools support gifted students, especially those in underrepresented communities." Dr. Patel, a woman in her 40s with warm eyes and a clipboard, smiled and extended her hand. "I've heard a lot about you, but I'd love to hear your story in your own words. How did you first realize you loved math?" Eli blinked. "Is this an interview?" "Just a conversation," she said gently. So he told her. About the time he watched his dad measure drywall and mentally calculate cuts. About nights in the library with borrowed textbooks. About seeing symbols on Ms. Harlan's board and feeling his palms sweat not with fear, but recognition. "I think I liked math," he said, thinking it through aloud, "because it never asked me to be anyone else." Dr. Patel nodded, scribbling notes. "What would have helped you sooner?" He paused. "Someone asking why I was quiet, instead of assuming I had nothing to say." That afternoon, Dr. Patel observed a session of the equation project. She watched two sixth graders talk through their anxiety before tests. She watched an eighth grader calmly explain to a fifth grader the difference between confusion and being stupid, a distinction so few adults get right. She turned to Principal Brooks. "Do you know what you've got here?" He smirked. "An unpaid therapy program run by kids?" She laughed. "You've got a prototype for inclusion, for student-led equity. And the most incredible part is, it didn't come from a policy. It came from one kid who refused to stay invisible." Brooks nodded slowly. That one kid changed everything. By Thursday, Eli was prepping for his first teacher-facing presentation part of the school's new roundtable training series. His topic, how to spot hidden talent, even when it looks like trouble. He practiced in the mirror, rewrote his outline, thought about skipping it. Then Ms. Carter caught him before class. "You ready?" "Not remotely." She handed him a folded note. "Read this before you go in." He opened it. "Dear Eli, you don't know me, but last year I failed algebra. Everyone thought I was just lazy. After your story, Ms. Carter looked at me differently. I got tested. Turns out I have a processing issue. I got help. I passed. You didn't just help kids like you helped kids like me. Thank you." Eli stood in front of 10 teachers in the staff lounge. Dry erase board behind him, coffee cups, pens, a few skeptical faces. He cleared his throat. "At my old desk, I used to sit with my back straight, even though it hurt. No one asked why. They just told me to sit still, focus harder, try more. But I was trying." He paused, glanced around. "Sometimes, gifted kids don't look gifted. Sometimes they look like they're zoning out, or messing around, or failing. But they're not. They're just playing a game no one gave them the rules to." He shared examples, research, personal moments, Dr. Lang's input, the peer program they were building. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Ms. Rosales raised her hand. "How did we miss all this?" From the back of the room, Ms. Carter answered quietly. "Because we were trained to look for sparks that shout. But some students burn quietly." That evening, on the walk home, Eli's phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Lang. "Heard about your talk. Proud doesn't begin to cover it." You're not just ahead in math, Eli. You're ahead in humanity. Eli stopped on the sidewalk, reread the message 3 times, then smiled. Later that night, as rain tapped softly against the bedroom window, he opened a new notebook, not for math, for planning. He sketched out ideas to expand the equation project district-wide. Student mentors in every grade, weekly drop-ins, training modules on empathy and listening, anonymous journaling sessions, showing outreach to schools without enrichment programs. At the top he wrote, "The right equation doesn't just solve a problem. It reveals a pattern, a truth, a way forward." And beneath that, bold and underlined, "Coming fall semester, district-wide, launch." The final weeks of school came faster than Eli Parker expected. One moment he was staring at the whiteboard in Ms. Harlan's classroom, frozen in fear. The next, he was walking down the same hallway, flanked by students he used to pass unnoticed. Now they nodded, smiled, even stopped to talk. The boy who once tried to stay invisible had become a symbol, though he never intended to be. And even as the last day of school neared, he kept telling himself, this isn't about attention, it's about access, about making sure that what happened to him doesn't happen again. The final board meeting of the year was held in the same packed auditorium as the one where it all began, but the mood was different. No tension, no reporters, just students, parents, and teachers celebrating a year of hard-earned growth. Eli sat in the front row with his family. Dr. Lang beside him, Ms. Carter a few seats down. Lena Morales was there, too quiet as ever, but when she caught Eli's eye across the room, she gave a small nod. He hadn't forgotten how she was the first voice to speak up in his defense. Principal Brooks took the podium. This year began with disruption, conflict, and to be honest, failure on our part. But what followed was accountability, change, and most importantly, student leadership. He gestured toward Eli. Some students changed grades, others changed systems. Scattered applause turned into a standing ovation. Eli didn't stand. He didn't wave, he just lowered his head and smiled. The next morning, Eli stepped back into Westside one final time this time, as part of the summer prep committee. He dropped off materials for the incoming cohort of exceptional talent seminar students who'd start in the fall. Ms. Carter met him by the office. "Got a minute?" she asked. He followed her into the staff lounge. There, sitting alone at the long conference table, was someone he hadn't seen in months. Ms. Harlan. She looked different. Not weak, not defeated, just real. Like someone who'd put down a lot of armor and didn't plan to pick it back up. "Eli," she said, standing slowly. "I didn't know you'd be here today." Ms. Carter nodded politely and stepped out, leaving the two alone. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Ms. Harlan cleared her throat. "I won't make excuses," she said, "but I need you to know I've been learning, listening, and I was wrong. Not just about your work, but about you." Eli stayed quiet. She continued. "I've enrolled in professional development. I'm volunteering with an after-school program for gifted students who learn differently. I'm rebuilding." She looked him in the eye. "You didn't owe me forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I wanted you to know I see it now. I see you." Eli nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." A beat. Then he added, "Some of us burn quietly, but we still leave light." Ms. Harlan's eyes welled slightly. "Yes, you did." They parted without ceremony. No handshakes, no promises, just mutual truth and the beginning of closure. That afternoon, Eli packed his bags for the summer program. He folded his favorite hoodie into his suitcase, stuffed his notebooks in with care, and tucked away a small envelope his sister had slipped into his bag when she thought he wasn't looking. He opened it before leaving. "I know you're going to college, even if it's just for the summer. Don't forget about me when you're famous. Your favorite little sister." He smiled and zipped it up carefully. The university campus felt like another world, bigger buildings, older trees, a sense of history in every hallway. But the math lab? It felt just like home. On the first day, Eli walked in early, found his seat, and opened his notebook. Around him, students chatted nervously. Some looked older. A few were clearly used to being the smartest in the room, but he didn't feel out of place, not anymore. A professor entered, writing an equation on the board. It was long, complex, intimidating to some. To Eli, it was an invitation. He looked at it for a long moment, then slowly raised his hand. I think I know where to start. 2 weeks later, Eli stood on stage at the program's final showcase. Parents, professors, and students filled the auditorium. He presented a project on modeling education equity using calculus specifically, how early identification of advanced learners in low-income districts drastically improved outcomes over time. His closing slide wasn't data, it was a single sentence. I wasn't found early, but I kept learning anyway. The room was still for a moment. Then came applause. Not thunderous, not dramatic, just earned. Back at Westside, posters went up for the official district launch of the Equation Project. A simple tagline printed across every school entrance. We see you now. On the first day of the new school year, a 6th grader named Micah Tran sat alone at the back of the library. Quiet, head down, fidgeting with a pencil instead of finishing his math worksheet. He was exactly the kind of student who used to go unnoticed, until Eli sat beside him. You stuck? Micah looked up, wide-eyed. A little. Eli smiled and slid the worksheet toward him. Let's figure it out together. And just like that, the equation continued. Not to solve the past, but to build the future.